happy Holy Week to you, or a good Holy Week to you. I don't think happy is appropriate, but Easter it is. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. There's an annual debate in my family about when Lent exactly ends, and a split within the family. And is it today? Is it Good Friday, or do you have to wait until Sunday to actually forego your Lenten abstinence? I'd be curious, Hugh, where you fall on this very important
Sunday
issue.
morning, Easter. He is
Okay, you're a
risen. He is
purist.
risen indeed. And look, I'm pre-Vatican II educated. It's Sunday morning. Take it to the bank. Yeah,
All
don't
right.
go for that Vatican II stuff. If you gave up beer, you don't get it till Sunday morning, and even then, it's not a good idea. Look, Congressman, question number one: um, Are they really going to try and do away with stepped-up basis? That will destroy the savings of millions of Americans.
It appears that way, Hugh. I mean, they're considering a variety of tax increases that add up to what I believe would be the largest tax increase in American history, increasing the corporate rate from 21% to 28%, increasing income tax, the top bracket from 37 to
That was question number two. Pause
39.6.
for a second. The corporate income tax is going to go to 28%. That's higher than the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, all we did in our tax reform 3 years ago was to align America's corporate tax rate with the average in the developed world, to make us competitive with the developed world. And now to go back on that makes America uncompetitive, and is actually a gift to our competitors, foremost among them the Chinese Communist Party. And it's going to result in offshoring of American jobs, a flight of capital from America, and ultimately at a time when we're looking back on the last year and realizing that we were too dependent, particularly for manufacturing of key medical devices and testing reagent and a variety of other critical technologies, on countries like communist China. We need to be thinking about, how do we make America a common sense place to invest, do business, start a new business, bring back manufacturing and jobs. And screwing up our tax code is a good way to achieve the exact opposite.
Question number three: Are they going to do away with the Section 199A rules for small and mid-sized businesses? It was a major portion of the Trump tax reform. It benefited every small business. Are they really going to do away with that?
That's what I've read secondhand, is in the proposal right now. I have not seen legislative text. But Hugh, if you take a step back, I mean, I think we really need to think about this in the context of what's happened in the last 5 months. I mean, we just spent $2 trillion. It'd be useful to talk to some of the common sense county executives in Wisconsin who are getting millions of dollars that they don't know what to do with. And the problem, as I see it, if you just put aside how they're going to actually fund it, and you focus on what they're going to spend on, all of this money, a high percentage of this money is likely to be wasted when it filters down to the state and local level. Because if a county executive suddenly gets $23 million, and that may not seem like a lot, but it represents two-thirds of his annual levy, now he's forced to spend it on something, whether that something is a new building or some infrastructure project or hiring three new administrators. That becomes a liability on your balance sheet over the long term. So this is going to have long-lasting, damaging implications for states and local governments who get this sudden injection of federal cash. And right now they're struggling to deal with the trillions of dollars that we just spent. And now we're considering spending another $3 trillion.
Yeah,
Money that
question
we
number
don't
four
have.
comes right out of that. Question number four is the Green New Deal. Is that in this? Is the Green New Deal part of this spending?
Well, if you start to dig into their infrastructure proposals, and I'm working off of Mayor Pete, or Secretary Pete, I should say, testimony before the Infrastructure Committee last week, it becomes clear that the so-called infrastructure proposal is a climate change, Green New Deal-ish proposal with a little bit of infrastructure sprinkled on top. You know, it's a
Well,
government.
I'm pretty shocked that you answered the fourth question. I thought you'd trot off the field there.
I knew it was coming, Hugh. I
I
knew it was
know.
coming.
Every week
And
it's a
here,
little bit different.
I didn't even make my Lent joke about the Browns giving up playing defense on third down for
Do you
Lent.
know that they
And
are they're favorites to go to the Super Bowl behind the Chiefs? They're number two. They're number two in the AFC. I'm telling you, this is the year. You better hope the Packers don't come up against my Browns. This is the year. So I want to go back to this again. You made a very important point, and normally we talk defense, but I want to go back to the point. When you give local and state governments billions of dollars, or even tens of millions of dollars, and they have to spend it, they don't make good choices.
Well, and more to the point, when the federal government, and this was one of the best things that was in the Trump administration's infrastructure plan. Now, obviously, we didn't effectuate that plan in law, but they took a look at the incentives through which infrastructure projects normally operate. And anytime you have the federal government covering a significant portion of the cost, whether it's 50%, 70%, in some cases 90%, the incentives get all screwed up. In other words, the incentives for the local officials and members of Congress are to be there at the ribbon cutting, the beginning of an infrastructure project, and the federal government's picking up the tab, so it doesn't cost that much at the local level. But over the life cycle of the project, the new road that you built that got you reelected, that allowed you to get a lot of sympathetic press, costs money to maintain. And that's why I say infrastructure ends up becoming a liability as opposed to an asset on your balance sheet. And part of the Trump infrastructure proposal was to flip that entire incentive structure and make sure that if states and local governments wanted federal money in order to build a road, build a bridge, modernize a port like the one we have here in Green Bay, they had skin in the game. They had thought through how they are going to pay for the project over the life cycle of the project. And the federal government could help and be a partner, but the federal government wasn't going to pay for the whole thing. And more to the point, Hugh, the grand bargain that is necessary for infrastructure going forward, if we are indeed going to spend a lot more money on infrastructure, is to simultaneously collapse the onerous regulatory approval process for infrastructure projects that takes upwards of a decade and means almost by definition that infrastructure projects are outdated by the time that ground is broken. Collapse that into a 1 or 2 year at most regulatory approval process. There's been a lot of interesting work done on this. And then we can actually start to build efficiently. Then we can actually start to get the most bang for our buck in terms of federal, local, and state dollars. But Biden's infrastructure project, as described right now, just continues a failed, outdated 1960s approach to infrastructure.
It is absolutely the dumbest thing I've. And now I thought the COVID relief bill, which wasn't a COVID relief bill, was pretty dumb. But this, I'm focused in on the stepped-up basis rule. I'm reading from Forbes. Eliminating stepped-up basis could be a middle-class tax hike. The president promised no one making under $400,000 a year would be taxed by his proposals. This impacts many, many millions of people who make less than $400,000 a year. It impacts every retiree who stayed in their house and saved for retirement and said if they don't have to use it when they die, it'll go to their grandkids. No, it won't. It's going to go to the federal government. The death tax Democrats are marching towards your saving. Do the Republicans have a plan to beat this? Are there 5 Democrats who don't want to get wiped out in 2022?
Well, here's the other thing, quickly here, that affects everybody. Rampant inflation. I mean,
yeah,
that's going to affect every working class and middle class family in Wisconsin. And that's where we're headed. And then just the second point I'd make is, the Biden administration has found money for everything under the sun. Wipe out San Francisco, $650 million of debt. You fund a variety of pet projects for Schumer and Pelosi. They found money for everything except for the thing that truly matters, which is the national security and defense of this country. Because I guarantee you, Hugh, in a couple of months, we're going to get the DOD budget, and it is going to be a cut. The top line is going to go down. We're going to get a lot of fancy mumbo-jumbo about technology and third offset and this and that. But they are going to try and convince us that we do not have the resources necessary to invest in our defense at a time when China is saber-rattling over Taiwan, even though they have spent all the money on everything else. And so it's very disingenuous. Yes, the Republicans need to be messaging aggressively. I think the more we start to educate the American people on what was in the last non-coronavirus blue state bailout bill, what is in this climate change Green New Deal bill being described as an infrastructure bill, the more the common sense of the American people will start to realize that the Democratic Party has gone in an aggressively far left progressive direction. And to my friends on the center left, the blue dog Democrats, to the extent they are left, I just would beg you to step back from the ledge here, particularly when it comes to some of the other proposals that they're talking about, like H.R. 1. I pray and hope that Senators Manchin and Sinema will not get rid of the filibuster, because if they pass H.R. 1, well, then it's game over. That is pandemonium. That is a terrible, terrible bill. We have to step back from the progressive ledge here. It is absolutely insane at a time when the country is divided, Hugh. I don't know how they can interpret the outcome of the November election as a mandate for massive progressive change. That is not.
It's socialism. Look, this is just socialism, and it will not work. It will destroy the economy. It will cripple the recovery. Very quickly, Congressman, I wrote a post column this week that suggested that governors who are getting this infusion of money might want to do what you just suggested, buttress the national defense by doing things like shipyard expansion in Wisconsin, Mississippi, Alabama, Philadelphia, cyber investment, hardening of the infrastructure. Is any of that going to happen? Is any governor smart enough to do that sort of thing?
Well, we do have some smart governors that will consider that. In my own state of Wisconsin, we lack a governor like that, and I'm sure there's a lot of other progressive governors that will just use it use that money and waste it on progressive pipe dream projects.
Your governor could expand that FREM shipyard so you could do 3 at a time.
Yeah, I mean, and extend that across a variety of industries. You know, right now, probably our biggest vulnerability, both for the auto industry but for the national security industry, is on semiconductors, chips. It might be interesting to use some of this money to figure out how we can onshore semiconductor manufacturing here in the industrial Midwest, so we're not dependent on Taiwan, particularly Taiwan that is taken over by China within the next 6 years, as Admiral Davidson warned us about. So there's all sorts of ways you can get creative, but we also have to just return to basic fiscal sanity at some point.
We will be back on that subject at the Nixon seminar on Tuesday night with